Starting in verse 21, find in your Bibles 1 Kings. It's in the Old Testament, of course. And find that, 1 Kings, chapter 18. Starting in verse 21. Go ahead and stand when you find that. And stand for the reading of God's Word. And I was going to say it also helps us to get the youth out of here, but they're already out of here. So we won't use that excuse. We'll just say it's proper to stand when we read God's Word. And so 1 Kings chapter 18, in verse 21, we'll read down through verse 38. And this is what it says. It says, Elijah came unto all the people and said, How long halt ye between two opinions? If the Lord be God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the people answered him not a word. Then said Elijah unto the people, even I, only remain a prophet of the Lord. But Baal's prophets are 450 men. Let them therefore give us 2 bullocks, and let them choose 1 bullock for themselves, and cut it to pieces, and lay it on wood, and put no fire under. And I will dress the other bullock, and lay it on wood, and put no fire under. And call ye on the name of your gods, and I will call the name of the Lord. And the God that answereth by fire, let him be God. And all the people answered and said, It is well spoken. In other words, they accept the challenge. Then it says, And Elijah said unto the prophets of Baal, Choose you 1 bullock for yourselves, and dress it first, for ye are many, and call on the name of your gods, but put no fire under. And they took the bullock which was given them, and they dressed it, called on the name of Baal, from morning even until noon, saying, O Baal, hear us. But there was no voice, nor any that answered. And they leaped upon the altar which was made. And it came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, Cry aloud, for he is God. He is a God. Either he is talking, or he is pursuing, or he is in a journey, or peradventure he sleepeth and must be awake. And they cried aloud and cut themselves after their manner with knives and lancets till the blood gushed out upon them. And it came to pass when midday was past, and they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, that there was neither voice, nor any to answer, nor any that regarded. And Elijah said unto all the people, Come near unto me. And all the people came near unto him. And he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. Pay attention to that. He repaired the altar. Then verse 31 says, And Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, unto whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Israel shall be thy name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench about the altar as great as would contain 2 measures of seed. And he put the wood in order, and cut the bullock in pieces, and laid him on the wood, and said, Fill 4 barrels with water, and pour it on the burnt sacrifice and on the wood. And he said, Do it a second time. And they did it the second time. And he said, Do it a third time. And they did it a third time. And the water ran round about the altar. And he filled the trench also with water. And it came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and of Israel, let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and that I have done all these things at thy word. Hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that thou art the Lord God, and that thou hast turned their heart back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell, and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, Lord, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. And Elijah said unto them, Take the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And they took them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon, and slew them there. Let's pray. Father, we're grateful, Lord. I pray that you help us this morning. And Lord, what this is talking about is, of course, a challenge between the man of God and the men of a God. Which, in a sense, we know there is no a God. That there's only you, God, and we're thankful for that. And Lord, this story is brought to remind us of that, and the power that's in that reminder. And Lord, I pray that you speak to our hearts this morning and help us to realize, Lord, the value of the altar and repairing the altar if it lays damage. And so speak to hearts this morning, Lord. Help us to Lord, focus on our relationship with you, because that's really what this is all about. And so again, Lord, we're thankful for your goodness, your mercy. Bless us now, Lord. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. You may be seated. Now, in verse 30, it talks about a little tiny heap of stones. And did you know that that little tiny heap of stones was the root of all problems? And is the root of all problems. What do you mean? Well, look at what it says in verse 30. It says, Elijah said unto all the people, come near unto me. And all the people came near unto him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. Now, an altar back in that day, what it was, if you read about the altar accounts, and at the times that here's Elijah, he's a prophet of God, and there was times you could go all the way back to Genesis chapter 12 and Genesis chapter 13, and of course Abraham building that altar, and what an altar ended up being is nothing more than a place to meet with God. And so we see here that what Elijah did is the first thing that he did is if he's going to call on God and he expects God to do something, then he's going to repair that altar. And so that's what he did. And can I tell you this? Every problem Israel ever had, and of course that's who we're talking about. I mean, I laid in bed last night and I did an outline in my head about from Genesis all the way through the end of the Old Testament. And it's really only about a 12 or 15 pointed outline. And you can start right from the beginning. And what's amazing is how you can see, and I don't have time to put it up here, but I can draw you out a little simple outline that basically outlines the whole Old Testament. And what's amazing is the first 10 or 11 points of that outline is covered within about 12 chapters of Genesis. And then from Genesis 12 on, it's dealing with the nation of Israel. And that relationship that Israel had with God. And what I'm saying is every problem Israel ever had over their some 4,000 years of existence can be tied to a broken altar. Amen. And the state of America, and I always tell people to do this, many times we can look at the state of Israel and where they're at right now, and we can many times parallel America with Israel, you see. Now, I'm not speaking against Israel in the sense that we should hold animosity towards Israel, because we shouldn't. Matter of fact, God says those that are for Israel, God will be with them. So our nation is doing the right thing through President Trump, who is supporting Israel. And God said, a nation that's for Israel, God will support that nation. And so it's a very wise thing for us to support Israel. But what we're looking at is history, and we're looking at facts. And we're seeing, again, that every problem Israel ever had over their some 4,000 years of existence is tied to a broken altar. And what we need to do is when we look at America today, the state of America at this very moment can be attributed back to a broken altar. Amen. When we look at the problems this nation is having and all the things that are going on in this nation, it can all be tied back to a broken altar. I guarantee it. You'll see it. See, the fault is in our government, in our schools, and in our churches, and in our marriages, and in our families. All the fault that lies in all those different entities can all be tied back to a broken altar. Now, you'll never understand that statement if you don't understand what the altar is for. Listen to I did a little study, and I studied the altar, and the first 3 mentions of the altar in the Bible. Listen to what it says. Because you'll start to understand what an altar is for when you see these first 3 mentions. Genesis chapter 8 and verse 21. You can turn there with me if you want, but you don't have to. I'll read it to you. Genesis chapter 8 and verse 20. This is what it says. It says about the altar. Genesis chapter 8 verse 20. And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast, of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Another mention is in Genesis chapter 12, in verse 7. That was the first mention of an altar right there. Then 12, verse 7, it says, And the Lord appeared unto Abram, and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land, and there builded he an altar. This is Abraham. And built he an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him. Isn't it amazing that when people have an encounter with God, they want to build something for Him? They want to build some type of common thing to where they can meet with God. You see. Another mention is in verse 8 of that same chapter, Genesis chapter 12, verse 8. And it says, and he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent there, having Bethel on the west and Hay on the east. And there he built an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And so what you see is it as a commonplace. It was a fixture that man would come to, and what they would do is cry out to God. That's what an altar's about. That's what an altar's for, you see. And right there, by the way, you're looking at the correct order to establish when establishing a relationship with God. And can I tell you, in our realm today, a lot of people tend to get things backwards. You know, they realize their needs. And what they end up doing is they built an altar. But what we need to realize is that there's an order that has to happen. And the first order we talked a little bit about in Sunday school, of course, first thing that has to happen if we're going to have a relationship with God, or if we're going to have a relationship with God, is what? We got to have salvation. Amen. We got to be made righteous. People hate that word when you talk about righteous. And it's because they don't understand that word. And I don't blame them. I think, you know, it has almost a self, how would you say it? When you think of righteous, you almost always want to put self in front of it. Self-righteous. And so when you think of righteousness, it has a negative connotation. But really, I tell people this: righteousness is nothing more or less than us being right with God. And the Bible has a way to be righteous, and it's very simple. It's simply by doing what God says to do to be right with Him. And we realized that the Bible, we were just down in Lansing, preaching to the football crowd there that comes into the MSU game. And that's what we're there for, is tell people how to become righteous. I even preach a little message that says, you know, we're not here to make fun of you. We're not here to condemn you. We're here to tell you we're just like you are. That we're sinners just like you are. The only difference is we have been made right with God. And that's the difference. That and what you do is you go into a little discourse where you tell them what the Bible says. And I'll say things like, the Bible says 3 things about us. Number 1, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. We're all sinners. Number 2, we all have a sin wage to pay. For the wages of sin is death, is what Romans 6:23 says. And then I say, but the good news is, Romans 5:8, but God commended His love toward us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And what I just did is in 3 simple little verses told you exactly what it takes to become righteous and to be made right with God. That is, number 1, realize you're a sinner. Number 2, realize you have a sin wage to pay. And number 3, realize God came in the form of man to die on that cross to pay your sin wage for you. And then I tell them, but you don't have to accept it. You know, there's 2 choices you can make in this life. You can choose to pay your own sin wage, or you can allow Christ to pay your sin wage for you. And I say, it sounds like a pretty simple choice to me. Amen. And so what we're talking about here is there's a natural thing that wants to take place. When we get saved, there's something that takes place to where you know, we had a young lady down there that got saved. And the first thing that she asked is, what do I do now? Amen. What do I do now? What's my next step? You know. And we said, well, the first thing you want to do is start growing in the Lord. You know, read His Word so you can understand exactly who Christ is. You know, understand Him better. That you know, because a lot of people, did you realize a lot of people think that, I mean, it's easy for people to be fooled and they're told by other churches that Christ really isn't God. You know, no. According to what the Bible says, He's God coming before man. You know, the Bible says in John chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the and the Word was made manifest and dwelt among us. You sort those verses out, and it shows you that He's God. Amen. And so what we're seeing is the state of America. Man, how can it be changed if people would get saved? Now in our text this morning, the altar was in need of repair. That's the first thing. Look at verse 30 again, back in 1 Kings in chapter 18. In verse 30, one of the first things that Elijah did is it says he took 12 stones to greater the number of the tribes and the sons of Jacob unto whom the word of the Lord came. Skip down. It says in verse 30, Elijah said unto the people, come near unto me. And all the people came near unto him, and he repaired the altar. And so what I'm saying to you, if you want God in your life, and if you want this nation to be different, if you have family that you want to have a relationship with God, this is the first place to start. Repairing the altar. You get it where God's comfortable coming. Amen. God's comfortable meeting you. And I'm careful when I say that. But look what it says. Look at the significance of the broken altar and what it means. Look at verse 17 and 18. We already read past there, but look at verse 17. Or actually, we stepped down from there, but verse 17 in that 1 Kings chapter 18, it says, and it came to pass, when Ahab saw Elijah, that Ahab said unto him, art thou he that troubleth Israel? And he said, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, and that ye have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and thou hast followed Balaam. What I want you to see there is that, you know what? Ahab was the king of Israel. And Israel was suffering from the reign of Ahab. Ahab was a wicked man. He was leading his nation away from God. And his nation was paying for him leading his nation away from God. And can I say something? You can say the same thing about America today. Now don't get me wrong. God can protect us. God can work in our individual lives. But there are going to be things that happen in our nation that because of the direction our nation is going, you know, and because we've been led many times in the direction away from God, there's things that our nation is going to suffer because of that, you see. And so here's Ahab, and he's blaming the man of God. It says in verse 17, and it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah, that Ahab said unto him, art thou he that troubleth Israel? And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house. You know what's amazing today? Did you know there's a lot of people who blame Christians? Did you know you're going to face a lot of persecution in this nation today because we're blamed for everything? Did you know that right now you're blamed for the issues that are going on with the racial issue and everything? You know they blame Christians for that? They do. Start listening a little bit. Start listening to what they talk about. And who's under attack is Christians. You'll see. And now in Christians, Jews, religious groups, you know, we're at fault for everything. And that's exactly what was happening here. Here comes the king, you know, the king of Israel, and he's blaming the man of God for what's going on in his nation. Says, and it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah that Ahab said unto him, art thou he that troubleth Israel? And look what the response was. And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, in that we have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and thou hast followed Balaam. You know, we've been in a nation for years that has been following Satan. Amen? It's true. I mean, you can go back in history and you can see that there's been times where the religious groups have said, we better not go in that direction. You know, you can go back in the times where a lot of us look back and laugh at it, but really it's not really a laughing matter. You can go back into rock and roll. You can go back into TV and all those kinds of things. And you can see where the, look up here, the religious right, we're saying, man, we better not go in that direction.
Look at the dollar bill.
Yeah, absolutely. We better not go in that direction. Oh, there's all kinds of hidden things on the dollar bill. The one eye and the pyramid and all that kind of stuff. And what's amazing, and we don't want to get off into all that, but what we can say is, man, look at what the king of Israel is saying. Is this you that's troubling us? And what's Elijah say? I have not troubled Israel, but thou in thy father's house. And he gives the answer. Same problem we have. Because they have forsaken the commandments of the Lord. And that's followed Balaam. Balaam's not a god. Amen. There's no other God than God. If there's any gods in this Bible, it's satanic. Always is, always will be. There's no other God but God. Now, it talks about other gods, but it always can be traced back to Satan. You'll see that. And so the significance of this broken altar, what does it indicate? First thing it indicates right there in verse 18 is a forsaking of God's commandments. Imagine living in a nation under that type of leader. Now, we could go back into Ahab and all he's done. And we could go back into Jeroboam and some of the sons of those kings and how bad it was. And how they were following the ways of Balaam. Now, just as I said, they weren't following another God. There's only one God. And that's God, our Creator. The gods they were following was Satan. You see. And what's amazing is when we start to look at our nation, we start to realize, when you start to look at our nation and some of the things we're doing. Now, I'm not saying us individually, but I mean, years ago I started watching some of these things like you go to the library, and my wife takes our adopted son Caleb to the library. And I said, I better watch, and she knows enough to do this, better watch what he picks out for books. I said, he'll go there, and I said, first thing all the books are loaded now with books on vampires, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I mean, that's old news. Yes, zombies, that's a big thing now. Where do you think all that's coming from? You could go to a party store and get a drink, and it's called a Monster drink. Now, I don't know if you know anything about the Monster drinks, but you look at that little trilogy of thing that's coming down, those little green squigglies. Did you know that's tied to Satan? Did you know it actually, when you look at it, and I know some of this sounds so, goofy, but the three squigglies that come down is an upside down 666. There's all kinds of things tied to that. You see. And then, and you look at, if I did a study on it, I don't know, probably a couple years ago, and I got on Google, and any of you could do this, Google the top 100 readers list for teenagers and see what it is. You'd be shocked. Yes, you'd be shocked. Get into Harry Potter a little bit. I'm not saying read it, but go into the background of it and look at the author's background. Oh my goodness, they're being indoctrinated by this stuff. You wouldn't believe, our innocent little nation and the things that are going on in our nation, how it's all tied to wickedness. You see. And what do you expect when you see with, the shape of our altar? What I'm trying to clue us in on is that, you know what? We have a broken altar in this nation. Amen. Don't get me wrong. There's some churches out there that are doing the best they can to build that altar up and to foster a meeting place with God. But I'm telling you what, you wonder, are we winning out? And I can say this, we can win personally, but nationally, you wonder what's going to happen. And I believe it's getting close too. Amen. And you see this like you're talking about zombies and The Walking Dead. All these TV things are being lifted to icon levels and icon status. And then in this text, in 1 Kings chapter 18, look at the mindset of Jezebel. Chapter 18, look at verse 13. It says, was it not told my Lord what I did when Jezebel slew the prophets of the Lord, how I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets by 50 in a cave and fed them with water and with bread and water. And you can't turn here, but in 1 Kings chapter 21, verse 15, it says, "And it came to pass when Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned and was dead, that Jezebel said to Ahab, Arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give thee for money, for Naboth was not alive but dead." What you had is a nation who was doing what they wanted to do. They were desiring wicked things, and they were doing anything that they could do to feed that wicked craving that they had. I won't take you into the story of Naboth, but what the king desired is a particular piece of property, and if the guy went to sell it to him, his wife suggested, "Well, you're the king, why not just kill him off?" You might say, that never happened in the nation of America. Believe. Anybody watching the news lately? You know, I know you don't want to get into all this conspiracy theory stuff, but man, look at some of the stuff that's going on. Look at some of the stuff that's been trailing the Clintons for how many years? Look how a guy who's under house arrest, he's actually in jail and under suicide watch, commits suicide. Because he's tied to government officials who, it's like, it's hard to explain how far our nation has gone. Amen. All because of a broken altar. And what does a broken altar do? Look how it affects our land. We don't have time to catch the full story of 1 Kings. But what's amazing is look what an altar does. And how it affects us even today. We look at, and you might say, well, when did this start in our nation? Before our time. Amen. Many of us, we got to see some of the things as far as like the school system, removing the Bible from school back in the 60s. And removing prayer from school the best that they can. And then accepting sin and doing nothing about it as far as our nation. Abortion, adultery, alcoholism, homosexuality, divorce, drug abuse, pornography, prostitution. Look at the things that have been are legalized just in our time. Because what our government has become is a government that panders and makes money. And they'll say, if it's illegal and they can make money on it, they don't get to the point where they say, should we bring God in on this and ask Him what we should do? Well, imagine what a community would be like if they did that. Well, you got to have a repaired altar to do that. Right over here in our industrial park, they're building, just poured a slab and everything for it. And I said, Josh, my son works for the city. I said, Josh, what's the slab you're pouring there in the industrial park? He goes, that's the new marijuana dispenser. Like, oh my goodness. What do you think that's going to do? How do you think that's going to help? Now, I know the argument is there's medical benefits and all that. I understand that. But we also have medication. Amen. And when we go back to, there's many preachers that I look to and many commentators that you can trace what they've said back to the 30s when alcohol was legalized. How it's wrought nothing but wickedness and condemnation on our society. Amen. Sad. And so when we look at this, the effect of a broken altar and what it has done and how it affects us. And we could go into all kinds of things. When we look at some of those things, how abortion, adultery, alcoholism, homosexuality, divorce, drug abuse, pornography, prostitution, gambling, how does that affect a nation? How are we affected? Man, we could go into everything. Disease, you name it. AIDS, cancer, disasters, all because of a broken altar. And how do we repair it? We'll look back to 1 Kings chapter 18. And look what it says. 1 Kings chapter 18. You go back to that verse and look at the first thing that Elijah does. It says, and Elijah said unto all the people, come near unto me. And all the people came near unto him. And he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that we can change society. But you know what? We can make an attempt at it. And if we can't change society, and if we could, this is how I would say we'd have to do it. One family at a time. Amen. Agree with that? You can change society, or you can change your community one family at a time. And who's it start with? Ourselves. Amen. And so what I'm challenging us to do this morning is in the example of what Elijah did. He took and he built that altar back up. And like I said, I didn't have time. I skipped right through my notes because of our time constraint. But what I'm saying is, if we was to follow that through and exactly what that altar was for, then that was a place for us to come, for them to come before God, and to seek God, and to basically say, and tonight I'm preaching a sermon that shows the difference between Saul and David, and how David was a man who sought after God's own heart, but Saul did things on his own. If he got impatient, there was a time when Samuel told Saul, he said, Saul, I will be there, just wait for me, and I'll make the offering. God will tell us how we're going to do it, and then we'll go win the war. And what Saul did is he grew impatient waiting for Samuel. His men around him, because of his poor leadership, started to panic and started to scatter. And Saul said, I better do it myself. And so what he did is he went against God's commands and made the offering. And then Samuel shows up. And do you know, from that point on, God turned his back on Saul, because Saul would not follow. And what I'm saying, it's the same for us. Our desire, what we need to do is learn how to build that altar, call on God, and go through him, and do it God's way. Amen. If we're ever going to make a change. And I'm not necessarily, I'm selfish. You know, I've gotten to the point where I don't really care about our nation. I care about my family and our church family. But what I know is this, is our residual will spill over into our community. If we get right with God, and we do right with God, and we wait on him, and we seek his advice, people can't help but look at us and go, I don't know what it is they got, and I don't know what it is that they're doing, but I want it. I want what they got. And it's all based on doing things in order. And that's what Elijah was doing here. He was putting the altar back in order. He was restoring the altar. He was getting to the point where he says, you know what? Before we do anything, we better ask God. That's what we need to do in our lives. Amen. What a challenge. What an opportunity. And can I say something? In 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. Is that good for us today? Yeah. I used to look at that, and I'm into this, right? The dividing and not stealing from the Jews, and rightly dividing the word and not trying to apply something to myself that's meant for the Jews. But when I read that scripture and I started to look at it, and that scripture says this, in case you need a reminder, turn there. 2 Chronicles. Look at what it says. 2 Chronicles chapter 7, in verse 14. If you've ever been to a missions conference, if you've ever been to a prayer meeting, if you've ever been to a revival, you're going to hear this text. And it says in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, in verse 14, it says, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, and will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. Now, I've studied that out because I don't want to take it out of context. I don't want to steal it from the Jews. But what I noticed is when Solomon built that temple, he even prayed for the Gentiles and said, Lord, when they come, will you hear them? And he didn't say it that way. He said, he was crying out to them. And he said, even when we assemble Gentiles and they come, will you hear them? And what the answer was, right here. If my people. Now let me ask you this. When you get saved, are you God's? Yep. And it says, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Now, be careful. We're not talking about salvation. Amen. We're not talking about losing our salvation, but what we're talking about is a relationship with God and enlightening our relationship and leading our family and building an altar. And God says, I'll respond to that. I'll come to you if you'll come to me. Amen. What a blessing. What an opportunity. Amen. Father, we are so grateful, Lord, I pray that you bless us. And Lord, I know I didn't do justice to that message. Lord, I skimmed through it, jumped through it. Lord, I got windy.